I'm Kevin Coleman.
I'm Jeff Bell.
And I'm Christian Williams, and this is the Footballguys College Football Show.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Footballguys College Football Show. We're back. We had a hell of a weekend of college football, so we're excited to talk about it. And I think we got to start. We're going to start with Tennessee and Kentucky. Tennessee wiped out Kentucky. Kentucky, the Will Levis train, Christian, is the Titanic right now. It's falling apart unless you work for CBS Sports. They're still on the Will Levis train. But Tennessee 40-46. Hendon Hooker 245 yards, 3 touchdowns. Jabari Small, Jalen White, they had a really good rushing attack. Jalen Hyatt, our guy Jalen Hyatt, 5 catches, 138 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He moved up on my big board for football guys up into the top 20, I believe now. Like, he's getting closer and closer there. You can't miss that production there. What is your takeaway, Christian, from this Tennessee game?
I mean, my first takeaway is that I was incredibly wrong about what this Tennessee team was going to do this week. This was a classic look-ahead game. They get Georgia this week. We'll talk about that game. But I fully expected them to kind of lay an egg here and maybe, struggle, get the win, but let Kentucky stay around. But the main thing that stood out to me was that Tennessee defense actually stepped up and made life really, really difficult for Will Levis. Now, of course, the offense was hammering on all cylinders like they always do. But I think if that defense starts to come around, then we're looking at, a justifiable ranking of number 1 in the college football playoff that we will get to as well later. Because if that defense plays the way it did against that Kentucky team, that's one of the best teams in the nation for sure. Obviously, we knew they were a top 4 team. We knew that they were this good on offense. But we've said throughout this process, this offense is going to carry them. And now Cedric Tillman's back, and we don't even really know what the ceiling of this offense is yet. We didn't really get to see that. Tillman got involved a little bit, but it's still the Jalen Hyatt show. Hendon Hooker is now, I believe, the favorite to win the Heisman based on this performance. And my other takeaway is that, the Will Levis train it's going down quickly. I think some of the stuff that we've had concerns about, reading the field and making decisions that are smart, they weren't there, and this seems like a dagger into his draft stock. I mean, he was being discussed as a potential top overall pick based on the tools. I don't see how a team even takes him in the first round after a performance like that on the biggest of stages. It's just unfortunate for him, but this Tennessee team's legit.
Yeah, and I think that people probably projected a little bit too hard on Levis's tools. They're there, but they're not. I mean, there were Josh Allen's comparisons, and that is just incredibly aggressive. He'd never had that arm strength, and this guy's beat up too. You have to remember, he had the foot injury, he had a concussion, he's got a hand injury that's going on, he had a shoulder injury. They just couldn't go vertically at all, and they couldn't stress Tennessee's defense. That just wasn't there at all, and so everything was underneath in this game plan. Tennessee came up, made the tackles, took care of that. Kentucky, they had a great start to the season, but unfortunately, this is kind of over. And they still play Georgia, don't they? That game has not happened yet. So they still play Georgia, and this is just going to be a kind of stumble to the finish line, I think, for Kentucky. But Tennessee, you can't say enough about how impressive they look. And my question to you guys is, how fast is Jalen Hyatt? Because he certainly looks fast enough. And if he's got this production and he goes out there, and this is a guy that's threatening 4.3 or lower in that range, one of those guys, this guy could be wide receiver 1 in the class. And, I think that maybe we're looking at it conservatively to have him even at 20 in the big board, just because if he's got that speed and he's got that SEC production profile, it's, there's elements of Jalen Waddle, elements of last year Jameson Williams in this, that like this guy could be the guy that you're kind of waiting for. And otherwise a receiver class that Kayshon Boutte was disappointing to start the season. Jackson Smith and Jigba looks like he might not even play this year. And Quentin Johnston's come on lately, but that's the one question, that if the physical is there, the production is going to be there, the pedigree is going to be there coming out of the SEC. That could be the guy that you see shoot up the board. And it seems like he's headed in that trajectory right now. But hats off to Tennessee. Again, we'll touch on it. It's going to be a long show, but we'll hit it more because they've got certainly a big matchup coming up and a lot of news items around Tennessee.
And to put Jalen Hyatt into perspective of what he's done this year, he's had a Jameson Williams like season from last year. Like we've seen that his production's there. 45 catches, 907 yards, and 14 touchdowns already, guys. Like, and obviously the 5 touchdowns against Alabama, we're gonna extrapolate, right, Jeffrey? But like you see those like the touchdowns there that we see, he could get to 20, he could get 22, 24, and recorded 40 times are hard. But what I saw when I was looking it up when I was talking about it, 4.29 is one that throw it out there in high school. And he's a track guy. Like that's what he was coming into college. So I think you're right. Like the pads look weird because they're a little high. He's got those things, but he's fast and he's quick. And like I keep seeing guys like say like, what is wrong? Why can't people cover him? Why are they never by him? Because he's that damn fast. Like there's a reason why it's not always defensive breakdowns. There's other stuff that goes into that. Hyatt's had that. And you're looking at him like you have to give that. Yeah, he's crushing it right now. So big game. We're going to talk about Tennessee. Christian, you got anything else with this one?
Just a quick note on Hyatt. I like the Jameson comparison, but remember last year there was a lot of rhetoric that Jameson was just a field stretcher with his speed because he is so fast. I think, when we're talking about Hyatt, that is kind of what he is, right? Like he's very much so winning with deep balls.
Right now.
And I think that can be, that can translate to the NFL level. But I also think, I don't necessarily know if he's going to line up all the time on the outside. He looks like a Z receiver to me right now, and I think he could win in the slot, but still attacking vertically. There are specific offenses that I think that can work in, but he's a little guy too. He struggles to get to 185, and I think that some teams are going to have problems with that. We'll talk about the wide receiver class another day. I'm sure they're all really small for what it's worth outside of Quentin Johnston. So who knows?
Yeah. All right, let's jump over to Georgia. Their opponent this week, they beat Florida 42-20. It really wasn't that close. Florida scored 17 points in the third quarter, and then Georgia's like, okay, shit, we got to play a little bit again. And then they kind of push it up to that number. Stetson Bennett had 2 interceptions. I'm telling you, Stetson Bennett's going to be the key to this game coming up that we're going to talk about. He had 2 interceptions, 2 touchdowns, and 300 yards passing. And just looking at across the board, like when you're looking at the rushing attack, Dejon Edwards for Georgia kind of have a big game, 106 yards, 2 touchdowns. McIntosh had 16 carries, 90 yards, 2 touchdowns. So they looked kind of efficient there. But again, Bowers, he's a stud. Jeff loves him. We've talked about him enough. 5 catches, 154 yards, and a touchdown. But the receivers, like, we still haven't seen that. I know McConkey's on there. There's other guys like Darnell Washington's out there. But if Darnell Washington is your third leading receiver, I get a little worried about that for that Georgia offense. Like, because he can't catch. Like, Darnell can't catch. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Like, he really struggles with catching the ball. On the flip side, Anthony Richardson looked okay, 271 yards, touchdown. Etienne kind of stepped up, obviously, 53 yards in the touchdown. Xavier Henderson popped off, 110 yards in touchdown. But this is really about Georgia. Is Georgia ready? Because, like, people are talking about this, Jeff, like where they're at. Like, their schedule, Vanderbilt, they look good. Florida, they looked okay at times. Auburn, they looked okay. They've kind of come back from that Missouri, Kent State kind of like where they were kind of struggling. Are they ready? Is this offense ready, or you have concerns?
My biggest concern on the offense is Bowers be the most dynamic player in terms of, if you look at last year's team, and I know that he wasn't there most of the year, but we know what George Pickens can be. And George Pickens in the national championship game attacked them vertically, made big plays down the field. And then James Cook in the national championship game had that huge run that really, it looked like the game was starting to get away in Alabama's favor before the injury to Jameson Williams. And then James Cook broke off a long run that put them right back in that game. I don't know for sure if that element is there in the offense now, because I think McIntosh is a good solid player, and Kendall Milton's a good solid player, but they're not striking those home run shots the way that the offense was able to get last year out of some of those guys, and the other outside too. You mentioned the receivers, but they don't have a George Pickens. And yeah, George Pickens was at the end of the year when they brought him out, but they don't have that guy right now. And so that's where I have questions about this team. But we did see, I don't know, that Oregon team that they beat. I would be really curious to see this Oregon team now go on the field with them, because I think that was Bo Nix's first game, and I'm sure that there were some SEC demons rattling around his head, seeing Georgia on the opposite sideline, rolling into that first game with Oregon, and I think he's certainly a better player now, but that game really fell away. And then the start of this game, too, they were dominating Florida, and then It really looked like they let up and allowed Florida back in the game a little bit. It was just one of those that, and it wasn't big things that they were doing, it was they didn't convert on third down. They had a couple turnovers. There were a couple fumbles. And then and Florida had a broken coverage and scored a touchdown and got it back to 28-20 was a lot of what happened there in that game. It was just kind of one of those cracks here and there, not systematic things that you need to be worried about. And so going in, we'll step on this week a little bit more later. It's just lack of those big play elements would be the biggest thing that is concerning me. But at the same time, Brock Bowers is certainly capable of doing that himself.
Yeah. I think Kevin highlighted it pretty well. Ladd McConkey and Darnell Washington being like your top kind of two options behind Bowers, kind of problematic. Neither of them can catch. McConkey had another drop in this game. It's getting to be like he's getting open. He's a really good athlete when he has the ball, but he drops the easy ones, and that's stuff that will come back to bite them in a game against Tennessee, or even when we get down the road and they're in the SEC championship game. Something like that could really impact this offense. On the other side of things, they've kind of kept their heads above water without Kendall Milton, who quietly was stringing together a lot of good performances right before he got injured again. And Milton has struggled with injuries, but it looks like he is getting back to practice this week, meaning they could be ramping him up for at least a bit of a role this weekend in the matchup against Tennessee, which I think that's your X factor, right? I mean, we'll talk about the game, and I don't want to get too deep into that, but I think Edwards has played very well. I think they've got a little bit out of Branson Robinson, but Milton is a guy that they were planning to rely on as the main running back. That Kenny McIntosh is great as a pass catcher, but Milton is that traditional Georgia running back that's going to go grind out yards, that can run right behind the interior offensive line instead of kicking it out like McIntosh likes to. So I think having him back, then we're going to see if Georgia's what Georgia normally is. But yeah, they took their foot off the gas in this game. I think that's the main point. They let Richardson make some plays, and credit to Richardson in this game. I did want to, I've been pretty harsh on him. He didn't look great, and I think that a lot of that was about the talent around him. But I thought he performed really, really well, and he was really resilient through the second half.
I think Richardson's got to come back. I think he's got to, but I saw a report saying he's going to go, and I just don't think he's going to get the draft grade he wants. I don't see that. And hey, Florida 1-4 in conference. Hey, they were back when they beat Utah, but they're not back. They've got some things to work on there. They're recruiting very well. So if you're a Florida fan, they are crushing the recruiting trail right now. I mean, they're losing some guys in Miami, but those boosters in Miami, they got the cash. But I would just say they're on the right track. But Georgia, like we mentioned, you got to highlight that. Now let's talk about Jeff's game. He loves his Ohio State Buckeyes 44, Penn State 31. This is a lot closer than you probably wanted to be. Unfortunately, they had an awful backdoor cover for me and Jeff on our game here. There's no way. I manifested the interception return for a touchdown, and then it just wiped off the board because Christian got me back. But it was, down the stretch, there was 28. Ohio State scored 28 points in the fourth quarter. They really sleptwalked through the first half and even the third quarter. Their offense did not look great. Penn State also scored 17 there. CJ, he looked pretty good. 26 for 33, 354 yards and a touchdown. That's not bad. I know people wanted to highlight his performance as not being good. I hate to break it to you guys, but that's pretty good against a Penn State team that was in the top 10 or 15. Henderson kind of steps up a little bit, so that should be encouraging for Ohio State fans. Travion, 16 carries, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a 41-yard touchdown run. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the god of college football right now, according to everybody out there. Dane Brugel, everybody out there is talking about him. 10 catches, 185 yards. He had no touchdowns, but he looked pretty good. That's really the story of the game on that side. Parker Washington, 11 catches, 179 yards, and a touchdown. That is something to watch. Okay, Parker Washington's finally kind of stepping up. They're starting to target him. Clifford, this is how they die, though, because Clifford had 3 interceptions, and that's really the reality of the game. Clifford was never going to win this game. He threw the ball 47 times. You're not going to win a game with Sean Clifford throwing the ball 47 times. It's just not going to happen. Jeff, what was your takeaway from this one?
Well, Clifford's interceptions were weird because they were all tipped at the line, and so it wasn't like he was. You don't even know if he was making the bad read. He was throwing it right to the defensive line.
He was. They
were making the interceptions.
He was. He was doing.
Yeah, but Ohio State's defense showed that what they've seen over the last handful of years is that soft middle of the field, and that's what Parker Washington was able to exploit. That soft middle of the field was kind of back there again for the Buckeyes, and so that was discouraging on the defensive front. But you have to talk about JT Tuimoloau and the way that JT Tuimoloau stepped up, because he was the number 4 recruit in 2021 overall, the number 1 defensive lineman, and that is really the guy that, as much as we talk about the Buckeyes offense, That is the guy that if they are going to push this thing to the finish line, him producing at that level where he was recruited at, the way he controlled this game and took over this game, that's where it has to be. They need that game wrecker on the defensive line that allows the entire defense to fall into place behind it. And so seeing that, because he showed a little as flashes against Iowa, but that clicking in there, if he can continue that through the second half of the season, that makes a different conversation about this team, because that is a level up from what we have seen so far. So I think that's the mention on the defense. Ryan Day did not have a good game, and you guys called it going into it, that the Ryan Day clunker game, but it really seemed like early in the game that he watched Michigan play Penn State and watched Michigan run it down their throat and decided, well, we're going to do that too, just to show Jim Harbaugh that we're tough and we can run it too. And then they weren't able to do that. And the offensive line was getting beat up front. And it was a combination between the offensive line regularly getting beat up front and Henderson really going down the first time he got touched. And I think that that's probably something to consider with his game, because the idea that you're going to translate to the NFL and be running in open space nonstop is unrealistic. And if you're going down quick in college, you're going to go down quick in the NFL. And so they got to get that figured out a little bit, I think, to bring him up a level. He's still got time. I mean, this entire team, other than CJ Stroud, is really sophomore driven, and that's the one thing to think about them. Of sometimes you see those teams that maybe a year early, and those are the teams that kind of break through, and then they have expectations the next year, and then they don't. But it does kind of seem like Ohio State is positioned there. I don't know. It's like the second straight week you can say the offense struggled, and they scored 50 points against Iowa and 44 points against Penn State. And so at some level of like the offense struggled, and they've scored 94 points over the last 2 weeks. And so if the offense isn't struggling, are they going to score 70? I mean, it's just one of those that. But I do think that there are things to be concerned with going into that Michigan game, and maybe concerns that weren't necessarily there on the offense prior to this past week.
Yes, that's actually the point I wanted to bring up. I think not being able to run the ball for the first 3 quarters of this game is concerning. And I do think that a lot of that is TreVeyon Henderson. I think someone went to TreVeyon Henderson after, it was probably Mayan Williams, that said, "Hey man, can you like run with some ferocity out here?" Because he did. He tried to truck a dude later. I think it was early in the fourth quarter. It might have been late third quarter. He tried to truck a dude, and I was like, okay, there we go. Why isn't that a part of your game? You are a big dude. You're a physical dude. That needs to be part of your game. His contact balance in this game, someone's suggesting that maybe he's not fully recovered from his injury, and they've got him out there because they don't have depth at the running back position. Who I can't remember, who's the kid that got hurt? Evan Pryor got hurt before the season, and so they don't have a lot of depth there. Mayan Williams goes out, and so now you're trusting TreVeyon Henderson, but they're not going to win the Michigan game if they cannot get going on the ground. I think the offensive line was a problem too. I think they gave up some pressure to CJ Stroud, and we know CJ Stroud is not the most comfortable quarterback when under pressure. And so I think if you look at what Michigan's defensive line can be, they haven't necessarily been, super penetrating this year, but I think that they will get there by the time they play Ohio State, and they'll get up for that game. I think that you're looking at maybe a recipe for Michigan to win that football game. It's music to Kevin's ears.
Well, and Penn State held the receivers on every single snap.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, there's the ref thing. No, I think you're bringing up good points. I think that okay, so let's talk about JSN, because I think we do. And we need to talk about Jackson Smith-Njigba a little bit. So a hamstring, they said, hey, he's not going to play yet. There's talks about him not playing the rest of the season, which I have a hard time believing he's not going to play in a college football playoff if they get him. Like, I think that he'd come back like Pickens did last year, look good, and then we have that. But I mean, I wrote on the big board Carl in the day, I'm like, I'm not worried about it. He already had that production. I think people saying that he would have been the 7th wide receiver. Do you really believe that, Christian, that he would have been the 7th wide receiver taken in this year's draft?
No. So who was the 6th? Pickens?
Yeah.
Maybe. So, and the only reason I say maybe is because we didn't see enough of him on the outside for a team to be super comfortable with him as their like number 1, I think. And I think that that's the opportunity lost this year, right? Is he hasn't been able to show that. That's tough. I think that's the range, like 5 to 7. I think someone may have taken a chance on him earlier.
Okay. It's so like for me, it's hard to project. This wide receiver class isn't Like, it's okay. There's a lot of question marks throughout it. Like, there's some question marks here. To me, I have a hard time seeing where the NFL is at him not going in the first round. I know there's talk about it. Maybe he goes in the second, like, right? But I just have a hard time seeing him not get drafted in the first. We're talking some guys have been drafted in the first recently. You're like, oh, Jahan Dotson got drafted, Tony got drafted, like guys like that. JSN not getting drafted with, and we see a lot on we've talked about offenses of football guys. We've talked about kind of where like the passing offenses have been down. We've seen this talent wise. I think that we need to infuse some talent in the wide receiver position. I'm not worried about JSN. I think he's fine with what he produced. But the one thing that you hit on that I hit on too is like the question marks were mounting about him being able to play on the outside, and he was supposed to show that, and he can't right now. And so, how much will that really factor in, Jeff? If you heard anything, you're the Ohio State guy.
I have not heard a word on this injury, and I don't know. I don't know what's going on, to be honest with you. I have not heard very much of anything. But I do conceptually, I think that when you look at the back half of the first round of the NFL draft, you've got teams with elite quarterbacks, and this past off season showed the value of wide receiver, the way that teams are viewing wide receiver. Yeah. And I think that we are probably accelerating quickly towards, we always talk about the value on getting that fifth year on the quarterback and taking them in the first round. I think that's going to be there a little bit for the receivers too, of teams that know they need multiple receivers, him being available for an elite quarterback in the back half of the first round, but also the ability to slap that extra fifth year of cost control on him, the way that wide receiver contracts kind of spiked this past year. So I don't know. It is hard for me to see him falling out of the first round just based on the production so far. And I do expect that worst case scenario, he's going to roll out that tunnel in the Michigan game and go out there and catch 15 balls randomly. And that's going to be, we're going to be like, okay, he's okay.
I hope he skips that game. All right, let's go over to college football playoff. We have the rankings now, so we get to dissect, we get to mock, we get to ridicule these rankings and talk about them. And I think we're just going to start at the top. And kind of a surprise, Tennessee Volunteers #1. Like they jumped into that #1. They got screwed because Georgia is sitting at 3 and they're playing, and Georgia's gonna be looking at #1 and saying, "Oh, okay, we're the defending champs, and you ranked them #1. All right." Were you shocked by Tennessee being 1, Jeff, or were you like, did you feel like, okay, I get it? What do you think?
I am not shocked at Tennessee being #1, and frankly, I kind of expected Tennessee to be #1, having that win over Alabama. I think it uniquely positions the SEC that if they are sitting there at 1 and they lose a close game to Georgia this weekend, they won't play in the SEC championship game. They won't play Alabama again. They could drop from 1 to 4 and just kind of slide at 4 through the remaining ranks and slip right in there at 4 into the final. And that's kind of the thing that I think that leaves this open, of that you having them at 1 versus if you were to have them at 2 or 3, because you have them at 3 and you have Georgia at 1, and this is a loss, then you have to move them down from 3. And then at some point you need to work their way back up into the top 4. And so that is the one thing that I think that leaves the door open. And this is kind of more a Georgia point than a Tennessee point, I guess. But frankly, I'm very surprised that we're not getting a 1 versus 2 matchup, because that's laying right there for TV, but TV could be the reason why we're not getting a 1 versus 2, because that game being on CBS and ESPN's control in the college football rankings could be a pretty big factor in ESPN saying, we're not going to hand you a 1 versus 2 matchup right before we take full control of the SEC schedule.
Yeah, I am a little surprised that Tennessee's ranked #1. Now, I get it. I understand the Alabama win is the best win of anyone in college football right now, I would say. However, Georgia has done – I mean, Georgia sleepwalked a little bit there, but I don't see – the SEC bias is always there. I understand that Tennessee is also in the SEC, but it seems like the bias always goes straight for Georgia, Alabama. And I think that we saw that. I think Alabama being ranked over TCU at this point, I think, maybe I'm falling into Jeff's trap of the undefeated team needs to be ranked ahead. I think TCU could keep up with Alabama with how they've played. The two teams have played this year. I think there's a chance that would be a game. They will get into where they're ranked respectively, but there's a reason that Alabama is still right in there. They're in the mix for the playoff. Tennessee being 1 to me is is exactly what Jeff said. I think it's setting it up so that Tennessee still makes it. I think they expect them to lose this weekend, and the Vegas line indicates that that's probably going to be the case. And then I think they want Tennessee in because they know that Tennessee offense, having the Heisman frontrunner in the college football playoff, assuming that he still is at that point, that's going to be really good for ratings. And we know that this is it has a lot to do with ratings. Putting Cincinnati in last year, wasn't that last year? I don't know. The years all mixed together. That was shocking to me because that wasn't a ratings play. That was we're going to give this team credit. And they hadn't really done that, I don't think. I think most of the time they're looking for, maybe it is for ratings though. I don't know. Maybe I'm talking in circles here because then you're setting up a better championship game because Cincinnati has no chance. Maybe that's what they're doing, is that at least they're giving the four best teams a chance for the first time in a while, I think.
I think Georgia got screwed because if Georgia loses this game and wins out, they're probably not going to make the playoff. Because if Tennessee wins and goes to the playoff and they lose to Alabama, you got to get Alabama in there. Tennessee will be number one. So if they're both sitting there, can you penalize them for losing to Alabama in the SEC title game when they beat Georgia head to head, right? And if they both have one loss, there could be a scenario where Georgia, they need more help. Like they'd have to get some help somewhere down the line. Or worst case scenario for everybody out there that hates the SEC, you get Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia all in the playoff. Because and you just somehow miraculously have that, and you get Ohio State, and Jeff would love that. Just be the only team in there. But if TCU goes undefeated, like there's going to be a mess if that happens. If Tennessee wins this Saturday, I don't think people realize like how big of a ramification it's going to have on the playoff in general, because it just kind of throws a lot of things in chaos now, because I don't think Georgia's going to lose again. So then, if Alabama wins, which is if Alabama could have beat Tennessee. So there could have been a area there at a neutral site. They might beat Tennessee. And now you're talking about maybe 3 playoff teams in from the SEC, and just a mess.
They're an undefeated Power 5 team is not going to miss the college football playoff. If you're a TCU fan and watching the show, thank you for watching the show. But an undefeated Power 5 champion is not going to miss the college football playoff. And I think that this is set up. The SEC is going to knock themselves off eventually, and you're going to, yes, you have this scenario that you could be sitting there with 3 teams, but if Georgia loses to Tennessee this weekend, and particularly if it's not a good loss, then what is Georgia hanging their hat on? They're hanging their hat on a week 1 win against an Oregon team that I think everybody's ready to admit is not the same level of team right now, and certain places would spin that win very, very hard, I'm sure. But if you were to look at it, early season Oregon versus current Oregon, it's very hard to say that they're the same performing team. But other than that, I mean, who did Georgia beat in the SEC? Because they wouldn't have played Alabama. Kentucky would have fallen off. Talked about that earlier. Tennessee, they would have lost to Tennessee. And so where is the high profile SEC win versus this is one of those that there are way littlest bits of Florida State going undefeated in Jameson's year, the year after they won the championship, and all of those games being very, very close games. And then they get into the college football playoff and Oregon just blows their doors off because you just kind of felt like that didn't feel like the same team, didn't have the same feeling all year. And we saw the performance early against Florida. We saw the performance against Oregon and suggest that that's not quite the case on Georgia. But at the same time, the sleepwalking performances, I think, merit concern and merit mention.
Yeah, so we keep mentioning TCU. I don't know how we want to take this. Clemson's right there too. And so, and I'm sure that's the next point of contention, but we'll get to that. Do we want to go to Ohio State now?
Yeah, I'll just read it off. I'll just go. Tennessee is number 1. We talked about that. We have Ohio State at 2, which is fair. You could probably argue they could be 1, but again, whatever. Georgia's at 3, and then it gets down to the bottom. So when we're looking at Clemson is 4, which I will rail Dabo's ass in a second. Then you have Michigan. Then you have Alabama. Then you have TCU, Oregon, USC, and then LSU sneaks in there somehow. Like LSU. But we had that last week. If you watch us, we said LSU. They love me some SEC teams. So 2-loss LSU is going to be in there. Okay. Clemson over Michigan makes really, in my opinion, not a lot of sense to me because Clemson has not looked good this season. Who is Clemson's best win? Wake Forest, who just lost to who? They just lost to
Louisville.
Louisville. Okay. And then NC State, they beat 30-20. NC State is not look good. And then Leary's been hurt. And so when we're seeing them, Syracuse just got beat by Notre Dame. You know who Notre Dame lost to? Stanford. And who else? Marshall. What are we doing here? And then they beat Syracuse by 6 points. Whereas Michigan, and I know that we didn't have a great, I know, don't yell at me out there. Michigan didn't have a great non-conference schedule. I know we were working on a quarterback battle that shouldn't be a battle, but we beat Penn State. We beat teams that were out there that we have already done. We have a better win than they do. I think we have a better offense than Clemson does. We are a better team than Clemson besides maybe the defensive line. I will give them that. I don't see how you can put Clemson at 4 over Michigan, but I'm biased. So what do you guys think?
So my take on this is Jeff's take, which is an undefeated Power 5 team is not going to miss the playoff. And I think what this is doing, it's projecting that Clemson is going to go undefeated. Now, I would push back on that. The rest of their schedule is really easy, but if North Carolina keeps rolling in the way that they have, they only gave up 7 points in the second half last week to Pitt, which I know it's Pitt. Pitt sucks. Keaton Slovis not good, but the defense started stepping up. And so now we're going to look at a North Carolina Clemson matchup that's probably going to be a top 10 matchup by that point. Not that North Carolina's schedule is really tough, but assuming some of these teams lose out a game here or there, that's going to be a top 10 matchup. And I think North Carolina has the tools to beat Clemson if their offensive line is able to hold up. So then what they're doing is they're projecting that forward. I think what it's setting up for, though, Kevin, and this could be great for Michigan, is I think Michigan in a close loss gets in over that non-champion Clemson team, because I don't think North Carolina really has a shot to get in. Maybe they do if they win out, but they're a one-loss team at that point too. And so maybe then Michigan gets in over the ACC champion with one loss. The kicker is then what happens with the Big 12 champion? What happens with TCU when they are undefeated? Because we have yet to see them keep out an undefeated Big 12 champion out of the playoff. I believe it's been Oklahoma most of the time, but that seems to be like where they go with it. So you have valid points. Michigan is a better football team than Clemson. I don't think that that's a hot take really at all.
Clemson's going to lose on Saturday night going to South Bend in Notre Dame. I'm just saying that right now. I wouldn't stress it out about too much. Michigan is a better football team than Clemson. And if you were to line up Clemson's big wins, they were all big wins that looked good on TV at the time that did not hold up well. No. And you guys have hit on that. None of those held up. And those were all earlier season. They had a great October when they played a whole bunch of teams that had proceeded to lose the rest of their games that they played afterwards. And so that's the thing that really kind of stands out about Clemson. I just don't see any justification. Like, who's Clemson's best quarterback? Is it Cade Klubnik? Is it DJ Uiagalelei? Or is it's nonsensical to me to pretend that if you were to put Clemson and Michigan on a neutral site, that Clemson would be within 2 touchdowns of them. I just don't see it. And really, I think if you were to change the uniforms on TCU and Clemson right now, that they would change rankings in a second. If you were to put Clemson's uniforms on TCU right now, TCU would be sitting in the exact same spot. And that is, they are selling. And the concerning thing to me is that the committee has not realized the reality of what Clemson football is compared to where it was a couple years ago. That's the biggest concern, seeing Clemson in this position, that they still believe that this is not a team that has sputtered terribly offensively over the last year and a half and has really grinded out some wins against teams that they really should have handled this year. And they didn't win some of those games last year, that they have not realized that this is not that same program from a couple years back that beat Ohio State in 2019 to go to the national championship game. It's very, very different. And if they have not made that leap, good for Clemson, but bad for the rest of us.
Yeah. And TCU has 4 top 20 wins. And that Kansas State win looks even better after Kansas State just rolled Oklahoma State in a game that we messed up on. But like completely, like those are the games that you look at, and they have a tough schedule though. Like TCU is going to play their way in. If they beat Texas Tech, Texas, Baylor, Iowa State, and then win the Big 12, they deserve to be in over even Michigan. Like I would be honest with you, like they have one loss. They're going to get in. They got to play their way in. That defense scares me at times. Like they're there. But yeah, you're right about the numbers. Like, who's a better quarterback, Max Duggan or DJU? It's Max Duggan right now. Max Duggan is one of the best quarterbacks in college football right now, and I don't think that's a hot take. I think that's reality of what we're looking at.
Yeah, TCU has this.
Compare these I was just gonna say it's insulting to compare these teams offensively. It's insulting to TCU to compare Clemson to them offensively. Yeah. You can't. There's no comparison there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say TCU has the second best resume right now out of any team in college football. I would argue the only reason Tennessee's up there is because of the Alabama win. That, like you said, at a neutral site, it probably swings Alabama's way. And so then we're looking at TCU having the very best resume and still sitting down at what, 6, 7?
Yeah,
that's
the Big 12 has better football teams than the SEC overall. Like just in this year, I'm not saying overall like ever, but this year they are. Yes,
disagree.
Just I'm talking about from top to bottom. Who do you want, West Virginia or Vanderbilt?
I don't care who the I don't care. I don't care who the 10th best team is. If the 3 best teams are all clearly better over one direction.
No,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me.
You college football snob.
Give me the
I don't want to hear it.
I don't care about the rest of them.
You know what?
I agree with you, Kevin. I agree with you.
Thank you. Yes, you college football snob over here in Ohio State. Best player, best team. All right. Oregon, USC.
3 of the best teams are in the SEC, and then the depth through the middle of the conference is probably towards the SEC.
Okay, no,
listen.
Yes, like the I don't know, like that feels like an Ohio State argument that Ohio State fan would say. Well, Northwestern is a pretty solid team versus Vanderbilt. Like, come on, you got to do the Big Ten.
Florida. Okay, who do you want? Florida or Oklahoma State? Who do you think wins that? I think Oklahoma State would. Right.
Well, this week maybe question that.
Okay, well, yeah, let's just take out last week's ass kicking. Okay,
but
besides that, like,
that's a good Utah team that lost.
Listen, when did you become an SEC apologist? Like, what is this? Like, when did this happen?
Always.
You've never talked good about the SEC, like ever in 2 years.
I respect the talent level.
No, you don't. Get out of here.
I think they are given the benefit of the doubt more often than maybe is necessary.
People forget that Quinn Ewers would have beat Alabama though. So Big 12 greater than SEC.
Right. This is what I'm saying. This is what we're doing. I'm gonna put it on Twitter, but I'm gonna put it on the show account so they don't know which one of us it is. All right. So then we got Oregon, USC, LSU. We gotta be quick on this one. Anything hand to me, LSU stands out to me because that's the total like. If they keep winning, that's like going to screw up everything and they're like that 10, like with their schedule. I mean, hey, they got a big game this week against Alabama. They win that game. They're actually in this playoff thing we're talking about now. Like that's I think the biggest thing that stands out to me. The Pac-12 teams are going to eat themselves alive. I don't see anyone actually pop out of there.
Yeah. Just mathematically, the only one Pac-12 team could be there, and I think that if it's Oregon. While it's good at a story, it's just how are you going to compare Oregon that got blown out against Georgia head to head? It's just very, very hard to make that comparison. And that's where it's just hard. But that 1 point, LSU missing that extra point week 1 against Florida State. How big is that? Like that between that and the Indiana Illinois game, like those are 2 early season outcomes that when you watched it at the time, certainly don't feel like they'd feel now.
My only comment on this is the Pac-12 teams have no shot at the playoffs, so I don't know why they're ranked here. Just put someone that maybe even Illinois, I think they have a better shot because if they went out, somehow beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, then they're probably in the playoff, right? So put them ahead of these guys, I guess.
Yeah. All right.
It's just one of those. Yeah, you're running out of games. You're running out of games for massive upsets to happen, and you're I think you can probably stop at 7 right now, unless LSU is the one team that controls their own destiny.
They kind of do in a weird way. Look at that, Brian Kelly. He's like What is he? He's just a cockroach. He won't die. All right, let's go over to Week 8 spotlight highlight matchups. Okay, let's go over this. I think we just got to highlight this game because it's going to be the best game of the weekend. Yeah, I'm watching this game. I don't care what anybody has. Tennessee, number 1 Tennessee at number 3 Georgia. It's at 12:30 Eastern, or excuse me, Pacific. Screw the Eastern time. And this is going to be a good game. Yeah, 8.5 point is the spread for Georgia at home. Money line is 240 for Tennessee if you're feeling frisky. 66 is the over/under overall there. Points per game, these teams pretty much match up. Tennessee's almost at 50 points per game, guys. Like, that is pretty incredible. They have 553 total yards, passing, rushing. They're looking very good there. Yards allowed, though, that's where Georgia holds their advantage, and you're looking at the Georgia team there. To me, before I kick it over to these guys, I think the one thing that Georgia showed against Florida, they had 30 quarterback hurries in that game. That's something to watch. Like, if Georgia can put pressure on Hooker and kind of force that offense out of their rhythm, that's where I think that's the key to me. That's where I fall into the key here. Christian, what do we think overall about this game?
I think that in theory, that is the key. But now Nolan Smith, the star edge rusher from Georgia, it has been ruled out for the remainder of the season with a torn pec. That is huge. I know Georgia is kind of like a next man up type of program, but Nolan Smith is a top 20-ish pick in the 2023 NFL draft. The kid is really, really good. Where I think they kind of just replace his production with Jalen Carter. It's just going to be from the interior that they're able to get pressure. Jalen Carter is arguably a generational defensive tackle prospect. Like, the kid is so good at football. The matchup I think that is the most intriguing in this game is cornerback Keely Ringo for Georgia against Jalen Hyatt. I think that is going to be a matchup. They're going to bracket cover Jalen Hyatt. Obviously, they're going to take him out of this game. Georgia is a very smart defense. But if Keely Ringo is able to kind of sit on an island with him and keep up with him, I think we may be looking at a little bit of a hampered down Tennessee offense, which I think could be to their detriment. I think they lose that game if they're not able to score 40.
Yeah, and you can just see Tennessee, how much confidence that win over Alabama gave this program, because early in the season, if you remember early in the season, Pittsburgh almost got them in week 2. Yeah. And Florida had a backdoor cover on them. That was only a 5-point game, but Pittsburgh, that was, I think, did that game go to overtime, or that was very close to going to overtime?
Close. Yeah.
So that was one game that is it's interesting to look back in retrospect, but they were able to survive that game. But you can see it's just the manifestation after beating that Alabama and getting that monkey off their back. They're just playing so loose and so free. Whereas Georgia, I don't know that they have played that way. And I think that Tennessee is a dangerous team because they can score so much, but also because they are playing with so much of that confidence. And certainly Georgia has that confidence, being the defending national champion and really not having anybody coming remotely close to beating them this year. But it's one of those that if Tennessee hits this thing early and you're putting Stetson Bennett playing from behind, then is Georgia capable of winning those games? Because that they did come from behind against Alabama in the national championship game last year, but this defense has lost a lot of pieces off last year, because you talk about losing the edge, but then at the same time, all the pieces that they lost last year too. And it's kind of, yes, as deep as that program's been, and I always say that they have those shades of being the old Nick Saban program that would grind you to death on defense, run the ball down your throat, get a punt block when they need it, things like that. I have less confidence that they can play from behind. Whereas Tennessee, I think Tennessee can play any type of football game from what we've seen from them. And that is a big factor going into this. Tennessee doesn't necessarily need one type of game to go their way for them to win the game. They can play from behind. They can pour it on if they're ahead. And that is something to consider. Now, it being in Georgia is an interesting one, that they're going to go on the road for this one, because Tennessee's big games so far have been at home.
Yeah. Now, and I do think I wanted to point out this because I meant to do it. Georgia is very good on third down. Their third down conversion rate. So Georgia's number 2 in the SEC and number 10 nationally in opponent third downs too. So they are very good at converting third downs and holding their opponents on third downs. So getting off the field against this Tennessee defense is going to be key. Like, and I know that they lost, like we talked about, with their pressures. Okay, they lost Nolan Smith, but if they can get off the field and they can hold these guys to 3 and outs and those kind of things on the offense, to me, that's the key. Like, if Georgia can do that, I don't know where it happened, but Georgia's turned into this program where they're like, well, are they really that good? I think we forget how good Georgia is, like in that program and that defense and everything. They haven't changed much, guys, since last year. Like they're still a very solid program. I just look at it and like, man, Stetson. Like it just comes down to Stetson and Hooker. And I'm like, it's hard for me to be like, yeah, the way that they're playing. Like, but I don't know if you necessarily need it there. All right, let's go over to Alabama LSU, which is kind of an interesting matchup here. 7-1 Alabama, must-win game for both these programs at LSU. Looking at the LSU game there, Tiger Stadium, 6-2, 4-1. Bryce is back. They each had a bye, I believe, right? They each came in with a bye.
Yes.
LSU didn't play last week. Yeah. So, they're coming in, rested, healthy, ready to go, which was big for, I think, Bryce and those guys. Alabama get their stuff back. Gibbs stepping in. Interesting where you're going to go with this. I still think Alabama is a better team, but Christian, what do you think about this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to can Jaden Daniels continue to be successful. We saw his best game probably as a college football player throughout his both stops back at Arizona State and at LSU. He's finally put it together. Efficient throwing the ball, he takes care of the football, but the rushing aspect is what I think could give Alabama a little bit of trouble in this game. But on the other side of things, Alabama coming off a bye week is one of the scariest teams. Like I would put them up there. I think if Alabama's coming off a bye heading into that Tennessee matchup, I think they win that matchup because I think that extra time to prepare is obviously Nick Saban's going to take advantage of that. When you have the best coach in the world in your sport, then you're going to be able to take advantage of a bye week, right? On the other side of things, we talked about it a little bit. Alabama's receiving core, someone needs to step up this week because I think that there is an opportunity to kind of expose some of these LSU defensive backs, but I don't think it can be the Jahmyr Gibbs show. I think they're going to need someone maybe it's Cameron Latu at tight end that, maybe someone else steps up that's not part of that receiver core. But I think it could be, maybe this is Ja'Cory Brooks' breakout game. Maybe he finally steps into that role, but I think this is going to be a good game. The spread's a little large for me. It's a tough game to pick.
Yeah, and Jaden Daniels has that skill set where we've seen Alabama be exploited vertically down the field, and we know that LSU has the receivers to be able to do that. But Daniels has that skill set of being able to eke out moving the chains. Like, you get him in the 3rd and 6 and he scrambles for 7, and you get him into 3rd and long, he just gets it, and then all of a sudden one of these guys, Malik Neighbors, Keyshawn Boutte, pops open downfield, hits you for a big play, touchdown. And it's interesting because you can see this going two ways. Is this the LSU team that got rolled by Tennessee, or is this the LSU team that rolled Ole Miss?
I think this is a Kobe Prentice game for Alabama, the freshman wide receiver. I think that this could be one of those games where he pops off. I know last game he had a great game against Tennessee and he didn't really get the targets last game. But I think Kobe, you're right. Someone in that wide receiver room needs to step up, or they're going to be in trouble. Alabama loses games with quarterbacks like Jaden Daniels, but what does that look like in this? Can he kind of step up? So I think those are the two biggest games that we need to highlight: Tennessee at Georgia, Alabama at LSU. And it's gonna be fun to watch those games. And you get to watch them back to back. We could have some fun there. So we're gonna pop off. So that's our preview of this week. Went through the college football playoff. Look at the spotlight recaps, all of that. We're gonna dive over to the games, and Christian's gonna get started with the sportsbook rundown.
Yes. So the sportsbook rundown. This is where we pick games, and last week we struggled a little bit. So
it's my fault. It's my fault.
This is true. Kevin won the week at 3-6. Jeff and I both went 2-7. So you know what? We're all positive on the year. We're still above 500. So that's all that matters, right? So the first game we're picking this week, Tennessee at Georgia. Georgia's 8.5-point favorites, as we have said. Kevin, where are you going in this one?
Oh, of course I got to pick this one. But as the winner of show last week, because I was so damn good, I'm going to go Georgia -8.5. I'm going to go Georgia. I hate that 8.5 because then they got to, I feel like Tennessee, but Tennessee might make me look like an idiot this time. We'll see.
Yeah. Jeff?
Georgia punches them in the face, and Georgia takes it to them. I think that they got the motivation they didn't need. I think Georgia just, I'm sorry, Tennessee, for what's going to happen to you on Saturday.
I'm actually shocked after we talked about it. I thought you were going to take Tennessee in that game, which I felt pretty good about because I knew I was taking Georgia. And so I'm going to give them the kiss of death here. I'm going to take Georgia as well. I think they win by 2 touchdowns even. And the line is kind of swayed. It opened at 8. It's now 8.5. I think we could see it increase even more before the end of the week. Next one, Alabama, 13-point road favorites going to LSU. Jeff, where are you going in this one?
Night game in LSU, but saving off a bye. I'm going to go with Alabama to cover that 13.5.
Yeah. See, I said it was going to be a good game. I think Alabama pulls away late. I think this is a good game for the most part. And then I'm going to take Alabama. Kevin?
I hate big numbers in college football. I really struggle with the big number games. I realize. So don't tell me, everybody out there. Like, if it's close, I usually nail those. I'm going to go Alabama, too. I think that I was picking Alabama before, which I'm not going with them here. But I do think Bryce, if they're healthy, this is going to be a different game than them. And if someone steps up in that wide receiver room, I have a hard time seeing them and lose this game.
We're just doing our duty to bless the people with an amazing Saturday of college football. I'm telling you right now.
True. Yeah, this is true. All right, next one. Clemson, 3.5-point favorites going to Notre Dame. I am picking first. Jeff, I want to ride with Notre Dame. Their offense looked better last week than it has all season, but I'm taking Clemson in this game. I do think that Clemson wins by maybe a touchdown. Kevin, where are you going?
So Notre Dame just beat Syracuse 41-24, and it's just they looked good. You know what? I'm so mad at Clemson. Notre Dame. I'm picking Notre Dame just because I hate Clemson so much right now and where they got placed in the college football playoff. That's my rationale.
I like it.
Already there. Yeah. Notre Dame outright. Notre Dame takes them down.
Alone on the favorite. That's
money line
here. I know. All right, next one. Wake Forest, 4.5-point favorites at North Carolina State. Wake Forest is coming off the most embarrassing loss of the season to Louisville. Kevin, where are you going in this one?
I would say, Fresno State lost to UConn. I'm gonna go. Wake because I think they're healthier, but that's not great.
I'm taking Wake. They snapped together after that loss last week, and NC State's just demolished in injuries.
I am with you guys. I think Wake comes out and they punch someone in the mouth too, this is not good for these teams. Texas, 2.5-point favorites going to Kansas State. That is a crazy line to me. Jeff, where are you going with this one?
I'm going to take Kansas State. Kansas State's very, very experienced up front, and I think that they know what they want to do, and I think they're going to take down Texas.
Yeah. Shout out Felix Anaduke Uzama. I think I probably butchered that, but yeah, I think he's going to make Quinn Ewers' life pretty difficult. I'm taking Kansas State here. Kevin, where are you going?
I'm going Texas, baby. Texas is back. Like, how do you even do this? Hold on. Texas is back. We're going. we're taking Texas. I think Kansas State played well, and they did crush. But Oklahoma State's really banged up right now. I think people don't understand that. Like, they are really, really banged up. So give me Texas. I think Quinn, Bijan, those guys are there. I think that offense can kind of hang with them.
Okay, I like it. Next one, Michigan State at Illinois. Illinois is 16-point favorites in this game, which is a really big line. Illinois has looked like the better of these two teams, but I'm going to take Michigan State to cover. Kevin, where are you going?
When's the last time Illinois was a 16-point favorite in a game? Like in a Big Ten game, I feel like that's been a while. I don't know. Michigan State just got suspended because they beat Michigan's player in the locker room. Like, there was a brawl going on. Like, there's a lot of things going on there. I'm gonna take Illinois at -16, which I'm not very happy about. But I do think Michigan State program's kind of in a free for all right now.
Yeah, Jeff.
It's a big number. I'm going big on this one.
Yeah, that's big.
I thought I was going to be able to lone man Illinois on this one, and I had that similar thoughts to Kevin there. I'm going to take Michigan State because of the number. I think they're going to keep it closer.
Like that. Okay. Oregon State at Washington. Washington is 3.5-point favorites. Kevin, where are you going with this one?
Yeah, I'll go Washington. I think Oregon State's playing really well. I like Washington's offense a little bit more.
Jeff?
Just give me Oregon. No, Washington. A late Friday night game I think of Washington.
I'm going to take Oregon State to cover, but I think Washington wins the football game. Very, very close. Speed round the next two. Florida State 7.5-point favorites at Miami. Jeff, where are you going?
Give me Florida State. I think they're a better football team right now.
Yeah, me too. Florida State. Kevin.
Florida State.
Okay. Last one, Liberty at Arkansas. Arkansas is 13.5-point favorites. Liberty has played well this year. I'm going to take Liberty to cover. Kevin, where are you going?
Give me the vaunted SEC team in Arkansas.
Shout out Clayton Gray. Shout out to KJ Jefferson. I'll take Arkansas. Woo pig suey. Is that how you do it?
Well,
Sure.
you should know you're an SEC lover. All right, let's jump over to the prop bets. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of prospect poker. We're going to be playing poker on the screen, so if you're listening on there, but we'll give you an update of how we're doing. And while we do that, we're going to give you some props that we really like. Jeff is 9-9 in this. I am 8-11. Christian is 9-8-1. So let's dive into where we have. So Christian's going to start us off with the over. What over prop bet do you like?
Jaden Knott, 65.5 rushing yards. The freshman phenom, he has topped this a ton this year, and I think that this is another get right game for him, in which he gets close to 100, maybe even over 100.
All right, so we got an 8 of diamonds, we have an ace of spades, and we have a 7 of spades showing on the board right now. Christian has a 9 of diamonds. I'm going to go with Kayshon Boutte over 4.5 receptions. He's hit 6 the last couple of games. He was at 4 against Ole Miss. This Alabama game, I expect some points to be put up, and they're going to have to go vertical in this. I expect Kayshon Boutte to hit over 4.5 receptions. 3 of diamonds.
All right, I'm going to go Bryce Young over 6.5 rushing yards. I like this one. I think he's been rushing a little bit more, gets on the outside. I don't think they're going to get to him as much. And 6.5 rushing yards is not much for Bryce, who's shown that he can run and do these type of things. So give me Bryce over 6.5.
We have an ace of clubs. 2 aces for Kevin.
Woo!
Congrats
Big
on your
suey.
show win, Kevin. All right, my under this week is Hendon Hooker, under 285.5 passing yards. You would be shocked to know that he has only hit the over on this 5 out of the 9 times. So almost half of the season he has been under this mark. And so I think that this Georgia defense presents another new challenge for him. I'm hitting the under here.
A 6 of hearts. Not that it particularly matters. My under is going to be Ronnie Bell under 60.5 receiving yards. He's hit that once in the last 4 games, but Michigan is playing Rutgers on Saturday, and I just expect Michigan to run the football, take care of the game, and be playing the second string during most of the second half of this game. A 7 of diamonds.
And I'm going to go under for J.J. McCarthy's pass completions against Rutgers is at 17.5. He's not throwing the ball in this game. They're going to run the ball like 75 times in this game and just not let him lose it. So give me that.
3 aces. Kevin
Boom.
has quite the
Wow.
game here today. All right.
Yeah.
So the last game that we play is we play blackjack. We play some trivia with blackjack. You get a trivia question. You get it right, you get a good outcome. You get it wrong, you get a bad outcome. But Christian is going to lead us off here. Kevin's already won the show. We do this for posterity's sake. Christian is going to start us off with a 20. Kevin is going to throw up a 15. And I have cards are running away from me. I have a 16. So, Christian, I'll ask you a question first.
Okay.
Who has thrown the most interceptions in the NCAA?
Most interceptions. Wow, that's a tough question there.
That is a tough question.
Back in the day, I would have said like Bo Nix, Sean Clifford.
It's Kyle Van Treese. So
Okay,
for Georgia
Wow.
Southern. I don't know.
Yeah.
Obscure question. You busted
Yeah.
anyways. I figured you didn't have much of a prayer, but if somebody's got a question for me.
Kevin, you got one?
Yeah, I got one. Jeff, who is the rookie wide receiver in the NFL right now that's averaging the most points per game in fantasy?
Chris Olave.
Yes, you got it.
Ooh. That is a 20. So we're sitting there tied. I mean, I don't know. Kevin wins the show. So
I win the show.
We're out of here. Kevin wins the show.
Sounds good.
We're out of here. All right. I just want to highlight, since I get a little corner here, I want to try to highlight the work that we do at Football Guys, especially for the college football stuff. We do a big board every week. Christian does his player comps that are really, really good. Jeff writes too, I think. No, I'm just kidding. Jeff definitely writes, and he goes into it. He has his dynasty. He writes like 75 things. I don't even know what all he writes, but his dynasty, article every Monday is really good too. We have all kinds of great college football content, Devy content. Obviously, the fantasy stuff's there. But I just want to highlight like everybody at the site at Football Guys. And just because I work there doesn't mean that like they're all incredibly smart people that you need to read their content, because it really will make you better at everything. College football, Devy, regular fantasy, dynasty, everything is there. And I cannot believe just how much content comes out every week. It is a wonder to see, like, just, it's a machine, but it's a machine with passion, and it's a machine with just good quality content, and people care about you winning your fantasy leagues. And I would just obviously check it out. And obviously, if you're watching on this, yes, but if you listen to us before you came from our other show, like, just highlight Football Guys and what they do, and it's worth the membership, no matter what it is, especially with stuff that we're going to be creating for you guys that we're really excited about in the future. So just check it out. Make sure you highlight these people and follow them all.
Go Bobcats. Go Ohio Bobcats. Win the MAC.
They're not in the SEC. You can't like them. All right, we'll be back next week. I believe November 9th. We'll be on at 3 p.m. Eastern. Until then, I'm Kevin Coleman.
I'm Jeff Bell.
And I'm Christian Williams, and this is the Football Guys College Football Show.